Translation, just because it's very pertinent to Ratha Yatra, of course. I'll read the first translation because it's a bit messed up on those sheets. Sometimes in great happiness, Lord Jagannath with his flute makes a loud concert in the groves on the banks of the Yamuna. He is like a bumblebee who tastes the beautiful lotus-like faces of the cowherd damsels of Raja, and his lotus feet are worshipped by great personalities such as Lakshmi, Shiva, Brahma, Indra and Ganesh. May that Jagannath Swami be the object of my vision.
In his left hand he holds a flute. On his head is a peacock feather, and around his hips is a fine silken cloth. In the corners of his eyes he casts sidelong glances at his loving companions. He is most fond of pastimes he conducts while living in Sri Vrindavan. May that Lord of the universe kindly become visible unto me.
On the shore of the great ocean is a large palace that glows in the effulgence of solid gold, and is topped by a towering temple spire that appears to be blue sapphire mountain. Residing therein, along with his mighty brother Balabhadra, and in between them his sister Subhadra, Lord Jagannath bestows opportunities for all godly souls to render various devotional services. May that Lord of the universe kindly become visible unto me.
Is the fathomless ocean of causeless mercy, his beautiful complexion is like a cluster of blackish rain clouds. He derives great pleasure from hearing the words of affectionate chastisement from his beloved goddess Lakshmi. His face is like a fully blown, spotless lotus flower. He is worshipped by the best of demigods and sages, and his character and activities are glorified in song by the topmost personified Upanishads. May the Lord of the universe kindly become visible unto me.
As the Lord mounts me on a galloping cart and pardons along the road, there is a constant companion of his loud prayers and songs chanted by large assemblies of saintly brahmanas. Hearing their rhythm, Lord Jagannath is favourably disposed towards them. He is an ocean of mercy and is the true friend of all the worlds. May the Lord of the universe, along with his consort Lakshmi, who was born from the ocean of nectar, kindly become visible unto me.
He is the ornament adorning the head of the Parvati, the supreme spiritual reality. His eyes are like the blossomed petals of a blue lotus flower, and he resides in the Nilachal temple that resembles a sapphire hill. His lotus feet are placed upon the heads of Lord Devi. He is overwhelmed by the flow of transcendental love and knowledge, and he becomes happy only by embracing the luscious divine form of Srimati Radharani. May that Lord of the universe kindly become visible unto me.
I certainly do not pray for kingdom, go for gold, riches, and wealth. I do not ask for an excellent and beautiful life, and disposition to love my Lord ordinary men. I simply pray for the Lord of the universe, whose glories are sung by Lord Shiva from age to age, to kindly become visible unto me.
My Lord of the demigods, please quickly take away this useless material existence that I am undergoing. O Lord of the yogis, please destroy the boundless accumulation of my sinful reactions. Behold, it is certain that Lord Jagannath bestows his lotus feet upon those who feel themselves humbled and helpless. May that Lord of the universe kindly become visible unto me.
The soul of the self-restrained and virtuous person who recites his verses glorifying Lord Jagannath becomes cleansed of all sins and duly proceeds to Lord Vishnu's abode.
Wow. Jai Jagannath. So, Om Gyana Timirandasya Ganagana Shalaka Chakshurumita Tatai Shri Gurave Namaha. So today, this sacred day, is the day that Lord Jagannath and his divine brother Baladev and divine sister Subhadra Devi come out of the temple and go for a beautiful ride on their chariots. And it's astrologically calculated exactly to the day. And in Puri, everything's very, very traditional. You know, the way, of course, the log. I believe Lord Jagannath is carved every 12 years. And, it has to be a particular wood and, perfect, everything has to be perfect for the carving, and everything that's done, the way the carts are built and all the painting and everything that's done is according to tradition. And it's a very wonderful festival, and it's very dear to the devotees because Srila Prabhupada, it was very dear to Srila Prabhupada living in Calcutta, not so far away, and even as a child, he had his father, they bought a Rath cart, they painted it up, and he would take it around the neighbourhood, and all the neighbourhood women would cook preparations and offer them to Lord Jagannath, and he would have this festival annually. So it was very dear to him. So once was such an early time, you think in ISKCON, it was such an early time that Srila Prabhupada started having Ratha Yatras. This was 1967. And they only had 2 temples, but that was enough. And he actually installed Lord Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra Devi. We had a picture in here until yesterday of Lord Jagannath sitting next to Srila Prabhupada because the devotees decided to take him on a walk to the park, which he said was not good because they were installed. But they come out, of course, for this special festival on Ratha Yatra. So the Puranas, we know there are 18 Puranas, and the Puranas deal with history, old histories. So in the Skanda Purana, the original Ratha Yatra and at Purushottam Kshetra, which is Jagannath Puri's sort of formal name, or Shri Kshetra, the first Ratha Yatra, the first temple was built on the site of the temple that's there now, and they started having Ratha Yatras 150 million years ago. So it's a very old tradition. And that was in the time of Svarupa Manu. And he was the 2nd Manu, and now we're on the 7th Manu, Vaivasvata Manu. That was a long time ago that it started. And in the Bhavishya Purana, so that's the Skanda Purana explains that, and the Bhavishya Purana tells that Sri Prahlad took out a deity of Mahavishnu on a rat. Rat means chariot or cart. So he took out a deity of Mahavishnu in his time. So it's certainly it's a very ancient tradition, wonderful tradition. So the story of Ratha Yatra, as far as, it's so far back, but there's a very nice pastime where Lord Krishna and Balaram and Bhishma and all of the Yadus decide that because of the upcoming solar eclipse, they would go to an auspicious holy place. This is the tradition with saintly elevated souls. If there was a full solar eclipse coming up, because that's actually considered inauspicious, the actual eclipse, they would go to a holy place, they would fast, they would take bath in the holy rivers or lakes, and they would distribute charity, and then take prasadam. That was the standard. So they decided to go to Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra was holy because Parashuram, after he'd destroyed the Kshatriyas, 21 generations, he went there and he created these lakes. He washed his hands and created these lakes. So Kurukshetra, just like we've got first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, that the Kurukshetra is a place of dharma, it's a holy place. So they decided to go all the way from Dwarka to Kurukshetra. So it was a very wonderful procession. They went on their chariots, some of them were on elephants, all beautifully decorated. The women went on palanquins, and it was a very beautiful sight to behold as the Yadus transported themselves from Dwarka all the way to Kurukshetra. And the Brajbasis, who were completely bereft and suffering, and after having Krishna leave their association, they knew that the Yadavas were going to Kurukshetra for this solar eclipse, so they also decided, they packed up their bullock carts and off they went to Kurukshetra. And there was a very wonderful meeting because they're very close. Relationships, for instance. Anyway, so they embraced each other, and they were so happy to see each other that tears were coming. The women were embracing, and the men were feeling so happy just to see each other. And it was a wonderful reunion. It's described that sometimes that they were feeling speechless. They couldn't speak. Their heart was throbbing. They were jubilant. This is in the Krishna book. It explains that meeting. So while the women were talking, Krishna took his chance, and he left there, and he went to meet his beloved gopis. So the situation of the gopis was that they had almost been out of their bodies. They had been so, it's described that they were drowning, they were dying, they were burning up in separation. So for them to meet Krishna was all their total focus and their total happiness. So Krishna went to meet them alone, and he was kind of pacifying them, trying to pacify them. And he was telling them, well, you know, we're not really separated. This story is in the Krishna book. We're not really separated. You should be philosophical. You shouldn't feel so afflicted, by my separation. And, at first he went all humbly, do you forgive me? I'm so sorry I had to go, and then he was trying to tell them to be philosophical. And because you're always with me, then there's actually no cause for lamentation. But the gopis were not very happy about that. They didn't like to see Krishna's royal garments for a start. And they didn't like the fact that he'd come in such, state, and there he was, no flute, no peacock feather. What is this? So they want to be with Krishna, not in a beautiful decorated tent in Kurukshetra where Krishna's all dressed up royally. They want to be with Krishna in his simple cowherd dress, with his peacock feather and his flute. They want to be on the bank of the Jamuna with the beautiful groves of kadamba flowers and creepers everywhere and peacocks and cows and calves everywhere, in that very natural, beautiful environment of Rajabhumi. That's where they want to be, and that's where they want to be with Krishna. So, of course, with Krishna in his royal dress, all around him there was this sense of awe and reverence in Kurukshetra. But the gopis didn't want that sense of awe and reverence, and there's no awe and reverence in Vrindavan. The cowherd boys climb up on his shoulders, they defeat him, they whirl sticks against him and tease, and the cowherd girls tease and sulk, and it's a very intimate, beautiful pastimes they have in Vrindavan. So the gopis were like completely out of sorts, that this is not proper, that here you are in all your royal glory, but we want to be with you in Vrindavan. So the process in their minds, they actually drew Krishna in his chariot. They were actually, in their hearts, they were drawing Krishna back to Vrindavan. And because Balaram and Subhadra had come, of course Balaram is very much a part of the pastimes in Braja, they drew him back as well. So this was their meditation, because they simply wanted to be with Krishna on the banks of the Jamuna in in Vrindavan, Brajabhumi, to have that intimate connection again with him. So in their mind, they drew Krishna back to regain that love and intimacy. So I wanted to read a little bit from Chaitanya Charitamrita, because Lord Chaitanya, of course we know Lord Chaitanya is Radha and Krishna, and he's combined. His mood is of Radharani. So he knew all this. He knew everything that had happened, of course, of Kurukshetra, and the minds of the gopis as they were drawing him back. So there are some very nice verses about this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, concerned with the Lord's dancing at Ratha Yatra, Madhya 13. And it's interesting also because Svarupa Damodara is very much connected with these pastimes, and it's his disappearance today. So I was going to read, 137. So, speaking in the mood of Srimati Radharani, Lord Chaitanya said, for most people, the mind and heart are one. But because my mind is never separated from Vrindavan, I consider my mind and Vrindavan to be one. My mind is already Vrindavan. And since you like Vrindavan, will you please place your lotus feet there? I would deem that your full mercy. My dear Lord, kindly hear my true submission. My home is Vrindavan, and I wish your association there. But if I do not get it, then it will be very difficult for me to keep my life. Because we know that Srimati Radharani was pretty much dead. Sometimes they would have to take a swab to put it against her nose to see if she was still breathing because she was dying in separation from the Lord. So verse 143, it is amazing that you have forgotten the land of Vrindavan. And how is it that you have forgotten your father, mother and friends? How have you forgotten Govardhana hill, the bank of the Jamuna, and the forest where you enjoyed the Rasa Leela dance? Krishna, you are certainly a refined gentleman with all good qualities. You are well behaved, soft-hearted and merciful. I know there is not even a tinge of fault to be found in you, yet your mind does not even remember the inhabitants of Vrindavan. This is my only misfortune and nothing else. I do not care for my personal unhappiness, but when I see the morose face of your mother, Yashoda, and the hearts of all the inhabitants of Vrindavan breaking because of you, I wonder whether you want to kill them all. Is it that you want to enliven them by coming here? You are simply keeping them alive in a state of suffering. The inhabitants of Vrindavan do not want you dressed like a prince, nor do they want you to associate with great warriors in a different country. They cannot leave the land of Vrindavan, and without your presence they are all dying. What is their condition to be? My dear Krishna, you are the life and soul of Vrindavan Dham. You are especially the life of Nanda Maharaj. You are the only opulence in the land of Vrindavan. And you are very merciful. Please come and let them all live. Kindly keep your lotus feet again in Vrindavan. And just two more. So this is Sri Krishna replying. Sri Krishna replied, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan Dham, my mother, father, cowherd boyfriends, and everything else are like my life and soul. And among all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, the gopis are my very life and soul. Among the gopis, you, Srimati Radharani, are the chief. Therefore, you are the very life of my life. My dear Srimati Radharani, I am always subservient to the loving affairs of all of you. I am under your control only. My separation from you and residence in distant places have occurred due to my strong misfortune. And then he promises that he'll come back. Of course he never does. But so the pastime went on. So the gopis then were pulling the Lord into their hearts and back to Vrindavan. So when we pull that rope, when we're pulling Lord Jagannath and Baladev and Subhadra, we're actually trying to pull the Lord into our hearts. That's our mood on Ratha Yatra. And that Lord that we're trying to pull in the heart is actually Lord Jagannath is kind of the embodiment of ecstatic separation. Because we know the story that he was listening to Mother Rohini telling the pastimes that had gone on in Vrindavan. But all three of them, Subhadra, Balaram and Jagannath, their limbs retracted, their eyes grew big, and they took on this very unusual form, which is a form of ecstatic separation. So that's that form that goes out for the walk amongst all the people. And when we see Ratha Yatra, when we are at Ratha Yatra and we look up at the deities and then look around, everyone in the crowd that come along, they're all smiling. Everybody's like really touched by this. It's a very potent form, this form of Lord Jagannath. Very unusual, of course. It really stops people when they first see Lord Jagannath and this fantastic cart. But the form of Lord Jagannath is very potent, and this whole idea of pulling the Lord is in Puri, of course. He's going from his royal opulent temple, and he's going to Gundicha, which is Vrindavan. So they're taking him to his simple. Gundicha is a very simple temple. If you've ever seen it, it's this very big bare temple. It doesn't have all the opulence of the great big Puri temple. So that's Vrindavan. So the devotees are pulling the Lord down to Vrindavan. And then a few days later, he goes back to his temple after Lakshmi and her servants come and beat up the Lord and his servants so that she can come back. There's a fight there. They actually have that pastime in Puri where they fight. The attendants of the Lord in Gundicha and the attendants of the Lord in the Rat temple, they go down there with sticks and Lakshmi, they have Lakshmi someone dressed up as Lakshmi Devi, and they have a fight because they want Lord Jagannath to come back to his opulent temple. And so after a while he does. But every year he goes back to Vrindavan. So it's this whole idea of pulling the Lord back to Vrindavan, and for us, pulling the Lord into our hearts. So that is Ratha Yatra. So, those two devotees whose disappearance today are very much connected. Sivananda Sen was a Vaidya from Kumarahata in Bengal, and he was such a devotee that his entire property was used for the devotees. Because he was, he had money, so he used it for the devotees. And for 6 months of every year, Sivananda Sen would gather everybody 1 month before the 4 months of Chaturmas and make a group which he would organize. So he would pay for everything on that trip for all those devotees to go and see Lord Chaitanya and Ratha Yatra. He would pay for the prasadam, he would pay for the tolls on the way, the ferries, and lodgings. So he was so generous and kind with the devotees, and very saintly devotee. He was very compassionate. At some point, a dog joined the group, and Sivananda Sen was out making arrangements for the day, and nobody fed the dog one day. So Sivananda Sen was so upset. Where's the dog? Oh, we didn't feed him, he's gone. And he was so upset that he fasted. And then that dog went on to, having had the association of all those wonderful associates, went on to Jagannath Puri, and when Sivananda Sen and the group arrived there, they saw that Lord Chaitanya was feeding that very dog some coconut pulp. So Sivananda Sen got down and offered his obeisances to that dog. And it's described that the dog disappeared, went back to Godhead. So he was a very wonderful devotee. He had 3 sons, and at one of the days also they hadn't been able to organize prasadam on time, and Lord Nityananda was feeling very hungry, and Sivananda Sen wasn't there at the time. He was out organizing everything, and Lord Nityananda cursed Sivananda's 3 sons to die. And so, of course, Sivananda Sen's wife was very upset, and as soon as he came in, he was like, Lord Nityananda's cursed our sons to die. But Sivananda said, let my 3 sons die if that's Lord Nityananda's desire. And he was feeling bad because he'd made Lord Nityananda feel hungry, but that was his mood. He just wanted to serve the devotees, the Vaishnavas. So his 3 sons were Chaitanya Das, Ram Das, and Lord Chaitanya told him one year, when you have your next child, you should call him Puri Das. So when they had their 3rd son, they called him Puri, and they called him Paramananda Puri Das. And when they went to the Ratha Yatra the next year, they had that baby, and Lord Chaitanya, when he saw him and that baby, he sort of allowed his lotus foot to be near the child, and the baby, sucked Lord Chaitanya's toe. And it's described that all the devotees were like, Haribol, Haribol, as they were watching this. And that devotee, Kavi Karanapurna, he became, because he became a great kavi, a great poet, after he got that mercy from Lord Chaitanya. And he's the one, he wrote this book describing all of the different, the actual Gaura Ganadesha Deepika, the actual position in Braj Leela of all those Chaitanya Leela devotees, because they'd all come with Lord Chaitanya. So he knew who was who in the past life, and he knew that his father, Sivananda Sen, was Veera Gopi, and Veera Gopi's job was to deliver messages for Srimati Radharani. So that was Sivananda Sen. It's his disappearance today. And the other one we have, of course, is Svarupa Damodara. Svarupa Damodara is such a vital part of Lord Chaitanya's Leela, and he chose Ratha Yatra day to leave. So when he was living in Navadvip, he had the name Purushottam Acharya. And he was very attached to Lord Chaitanya always. So we know why, because he is actually Lalita. Srimati Radharani's very intimate associate. So the two most intimate associates of Radharani are Lalita and Vishaka. So Svarupa Damodar came, he's Lalita, and Ramananda Roy is Vishaka, and the Lord gathered them to get with him in those last years of separation that he was suffering and so intensely separation. They were with him always, Vishaka and Lalita, in the form of Ramananda Roy and Svarupa Damodar. So when Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, it's described that Svarupa Damodar became a little mad, or he became mad. And he went away to Varanasi, and he took sannyas there, although he always sort of kept the brahmachari, because he didn't sort of take a danda or anything. His name was Svarupa there. So after some time, he went to Jagannath Puri, and it's very pathetic, when he met Lord Chaitanya again, he was crying, why, how could I have left you, but Lord Chaitanya was just ecstatic to see him and have him back, he wasn't upset, that he'd gone away for some time to Varanasi. But he became then Lord Chaitanya's constant companion, and it's described that Svarupa Damodar was very expert in singing, had a beautiful singing voice, very expert in singing. And also he was a very great scholar. And it's described that just like Lalita and Vishaka, they would always know what Srimati Radharani was thinking. So they would make arrangements because they knew her mood. And in the same way, Lalita and Vishaka, as Svarupa Damodar and Ramananda Roy, Svarupa Damodar was always knowing the mood of Lord Chaitanya. And when others would not understand why Lord Chaitanya was saying something in crying separation, Lalita would always understand. And she was able to soothe Lord Chaitanya. He was able to soothe Lord Chaitanya because he would say the various beautiful prayers that were just fitting and that would pacify the Lord. So he was such a wonderful companion, you couldn't imagine. So it's described that he had mystic awareness of the Lord's inner purpose, and that mystic awareness was deep and unfathomable, and he was an ocean of rasa. So And it's described that he was the limit of scholarship. That's why people would come and run things by him before they presented them to the Lord. It's described that he generally didn't converse with people. He kept to himself. He liked to remain alone. But he was the very embodiment of Krishna Prema. He was like a second Mahaprabhu in the sense that he fully understood the Lord's conclusions on Krishna Tattva and Krishna Bhakti, and he could fully represent them. So whoever wanted to bring anything before the Lord, a book, a poem, a song, would first bring it to Svarupa Damodara, who would examine it before the Lord would be presented with it. Because sometimes, people had drawn the wrong conclusion, Rasavas, and Svarupa Damodara would say, no, you cannot present that to the Lord. So he knew what the Lord would be happy to read and what would make him unhappy. Anything opposed to bhakti would make the Lord unhappy, and Svarupa Damodara would always check. So he would sing for Lord Chaitanya the songs of Vidyapati, Chandidas, and he would sing from the Gita Govinda. So this gave the Lord much pleasure. So we know that these pastimes in these Gita Govindas, they're very intimate and exalted. But because during the daytime they would have Harinam, but in the night they would relish these pastimes. Just the three of them. And also Raghunath Das, who was also he was a Manjari, he was Svarupa Damodara's right-hand man, because when Raghunath Das came to Puri, Lord Chaitanya said, you'll be under, Svarupa Damodara will look after you. So they became also very close. So sometimes Raghunath Das was there and heard these beautiful pastimes, but mostly it was Svarupa Damodara and Ramananda Roy who were just relishing these beautiful pastimes in the evening and night, so much so that Lord Chaitanya would sometimes undergo these incredible transformations. If you read them in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you almost can't bear it. His joints would become separated and all pretty intense exhibitions of love of God. So it would be Svarupa Damodara who would know. He would ask the devotees to chant, and he would chant in Lord Chaitanya's ear and bring him back to consciousness. So Lord Chaitanya used to call him Damodar because he was very expert in music. He had expert singing and musical skills. So he added Damodar onto his name of Svarupa. So this is a prayer that Svarupa Damodar wrote. O ocean of mercy, Sri Chaitanya, let that which easily drives away whatever pain we have been experiencing in this material world, that which is all purifying, that which manifests the greatest transcendental bliss, that which by its sunrise casts away all the doubtful conclusions of the Shastra, that which rains rasa on our hearts and minds, rules our consciousness, and thus causes jubilation, that all liberating, all auspiciousness giving, the limit of Madhurya Ras, mercy of yours, let it arise within our hearts. So obviously Svarupa Damodara knew Lord Chaitanya's heart, knew everything, knew exactly Lord Chaitanya's position, and supported him constantly in that time that Lord Chaitanya was living in Jagannath Puri. Okay, so I think that is all. I'm not sure how Svarupa Damodara passed away, how he spent his last days. Obviously it would have been in separation. How long after Lord Chaitanya left he left, I don't know. I didn't find that out. But he's certainly an exalted soul, and this is the day we can pray to them. they've got so much to give, and they are especially merciful on these days, so that we can beg for their mercy. We can sort of work out where we need to go on our next little step on the way, and pray for their help, because they're ready. They're wanting to give that on these special days. So if any of you have a television and some time today, you can go on YouTube and you can look up Puri Ratha Yatra. It's fantastic. It's very long. They've got so many things they go through, but it's pretty wonderful, especially
3 hours of live broadcast.
3 hours, right? Do you know what time it starts? No. Anyways.
They record it, so you can log on and you can always slide back and catch up.
Right. It's fantastic to watch. It's just mind-blowing. And how huge they are. And Lord Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra Devi. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to the holy day of Sri Ratha Yatra. All glories to the departed Vaishnavas. And all glories to all the Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna.
I had some questions.
Yeah. Okay.
I just had 2 questions. First one was... I have 2 questions. The first one, Gundicha Marjanam, is that equal to Vrindavan? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, they call it Sundarachala.
Okay.
That's their term, Sundarachala, but it's Vrindavan.
Okay, so now my other question is to do with deity worship, and I know that you can answer this. When we're dressing the deities, we're meant to be in the mood of Lord Narayan in opulence. But sometimes the most simple Vrindavan mood dressing of the deities wins our heart. So can you tell me how you can, is that okay still to do that mood of Vrindavan, or even though we've been told we should dress in more opulent way?
Well, I'm just remembering one time, this is really, but anyway, Vishalini came to Bombay in 1974, and we made this outfit for Radharani for Radhastami. And we made this kind of bonnet with buckram, It was a green and yellow outfit. And Prabhupada was there on Radhastami. So we were like, we've kind of transgressed. Because in those days, Radharani used to wear these big crowns and the big effulgences and I forget what they call the earrings that come down here, the proper name. And they used to wear that all around the movement, So anyway, the curtains opened and we were like, so Prabhupada always used to do his full obeisances, and then he would go and he would look at the deities, So he would be there and he would look and he'd come. This day he was there for ages. And we were like, whoa. So, he wasn't unhappy, that we'd sort of transgressed that. He was very happy, when he came back to the Vyasa-san, he was very happy, but really he would have stayed 3 times as long as he normally stayed, looking at the deities those days. And there was only Radha Rasa Bihari there, the little deities. So, we felt like, phew. But I know that Srila Prabhupada did say we do treat the deities like Lakshmi Narayan because we're not pure enough to have that sort of intimate, loving Krishna like the Vrindavan inhabitants do, who don't have any awe and reverence. So we have to keep that in order to make sure that we keep the deity worship standard up. But, sometimes the devotees do dress, in that sort of more Vrindavan style. And even in Vrindavan itself, the deities sort of have kind of changed a little bit from that. But still, the idea is that when Krishna is ready to show us that Vrindavan, like when Lord Chaitanya would run in to see Lord Jagannath, he would see Lord Jagannath in his threefold bending Shyamasundar form. That's how he saw him. So, but when we see Lord Jagannath, we see that wooden form, So I think that Srila Prabhupada always wanted us to do that very carefully, to be respectful and have that respectful mood. And at some point, by Krishna's grace, in some life, we'll get the other vision. Hare Krishna.
Just just a little comment, if you, with your permission. Just today is Sri Damodara's disappearance, and just a reflection. We have to be very grateful because he kept a diary of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, which eventually was lost. But Raghunath Das, who was put under him, as you mentioned, got access to it before it got lost and memorised it. And that's Christian Askavara has got all this information that he put in the CC.
Indeed.
So we're totally indebted to Sri Damodara. We wouldn't have all this information about Lord Chaitanya.
Yeah, because there's no other books that really deal with that time, later time. There's a lot about Navadvip. But yes, all glories to Sri Damodara. And all glories to Raghunath Das for having such a memory that he memorised it all.
and sorry to take over the microphone, but you would have heard this, but Giri Raj Maharaj on his blog wrote many years ago that Prabhupada told him on Ratha Yatra, if anybody sees the Ratha Yatra, sees Lord Jagannath, at the time of death, he said that your whole life runs before you, rushes past you. And he says when you get to the moment where you saw Lord Jagannath in your life, it freezes there.
Yeah.
And then you leave your body.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's amazing.
I'll say, okay, excuse my poor English. This is, I guess, semi-paraphrasing. Giriraj Maharaj said, the Prabhupada said, if you see Lord Jagannath, you see Ratha Yatra, you see Lord Jagannath, that means the devotees and the public. At the time of death, your whole life flashes before you. And when it gets to the moment where you saw that Lord Jagannath, it freezes there. And then you leave your body. That's the last. So Lord Jagannath is an ocean of mercy.
Yeah. And in that first Ratha Yatra that they did with the flatbed, Mukunda Maharaj was saying, actually, anyway, there were a lot of intoxicated people here. And Prabhupada was saying to them, you're all going to go back to Godhead. So Lord Jagannath is very, very, very potent. Jai Jagannath. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sorry to impose. Yeah, Hare Krishna.